Alright, buckle up. Gotta tell you about something I stumbled on. Something so twisted it makes my skin crawl just recalling it. We're talking pictures no decent person should ever lay eyes on. Pictures that make doctors argue whether showing M is even right. This ain't just some spooky campfire tale. This happened back in 1971, deep in the backwoods of Virginia, a place most folks forgot existed. A young girl named Sarah Mae Whitaker, just 17 years old, gave birth to something that turned everything we thought we knew about families, blood, and the nasty secrets they'll kill for right on its head. When those doctors saw what came out of her, 3 of them walked right out of that delivery room, and one fella, he hung up his stethoscope for good, never practiced medicine again. See, that baby born that October morning wasn't just some sad result of family messing around. No, sir. It was the end point of something a whole lot darker. A bloodline so knotted up and rotted from generations of purposely marrying kin that later, scientists said it couldn't even happen. But I'm telling ya, the hospital papers are real. The photos are real. And that poor creature? It was real, least for the little while they let it live. But here's the part that sticks with ya, long after you hear this. When the law demanded Sarah Mae name the daddy, every grown man in her family, her own pa, her uncle, her granddaddy, even her brother, they all stepped up and said it was them. And get this, it wasn't out of shame or trying to confess nothing. It was pride. They were guarding something they called the pure line, a family tradition kept going for more than 100 years up in the Appalachian Hills. A place where outsiders didn't go, 'cause of skin questions got you hurt. That baby lived 6 days. Just 6 days. But in them 6 days, it changed every medical book out there and spilled a family secret so ugly the Federal Bureau of Investigation locked up the whole case tight, stamped it classified for 50 years. Them files, they got opened up quiet-like in 2021. Hardly anybody noticed. Hardly anybody knows what's in them. Tonight, you're going to hear why some truths are buried so deep that just talking about them feels like trespassing on ground that's both holy and cursed. The Whittaker name first popped up way back in 1847 in Roanoke County, Virginia, census records. Fella named Joshua Whittaker grabbed himself 200 acres of mountain land nobody else wanted. Dirt was poor, winters were mean, and the closest town was 3 days hard ride through dangerous country. But Joshua, he wasn't looking for riches. He wanted to be alone. And in them deep, misty valleys, where the fog clung to the mountains like it was hiding secrets, the Whittakers started an experiment that lasted 5 whole generations. Joshua brought 2 wives, his legal wife Martha and her younger sister Rebecca. Said Rebecca was his companion, under some old frontier rule. The local preacher, begging for any flock out in the wilderness, blessed both marriages. By 1855, Joshua had himself 14 kids between the 2 sisters. But here's where things take that first nasty turn. When them kids grew up, they didn't go courting neighbors. Nah, they married each other. Family journals, found years later hidden in a cellar under the old home place, show a real messed up way of thinking. Joshua figured McZinn bloodlines made folks weaker, watered down what he called the divine spark God put special in his family. He convinced his kids they were chosen, special, and that keeping that blood pure was the most important thing there was. Come the 1880s, the Whittaker family tree wasn't a tree no more. It was like a tangled vine, looping back on itself over and over. The kids born from this, they were different. Folks nearby whispered about Whittaker children who never talked, walked funny, had eyes that looked clean through you, empty-like. Local doctors stopped going to Whittaker births after 1890, said the family was cursed. But the Whittakers? They didn't see no curse. They saw perfection. Each generation doubled down, convinced they were getting closer to some kind of genetic ideal the sinful outside world was too dirty to understand. By 1920, the Whittaker blood was something that plain defied nature. What started as brothers and sisters marrying turned into something way more complicated and awful. They cooked up a rotation system, a careful schedule where every woman who could have babies would have M by several different men in the family, in a set order. They kept records like you wouldn't believe, treating making babies like breeding prize hogs. Sarah Mae's grandma, Charity Whittaker, born in 1925, she was the kid of her mother and 3 different fellas, her grandfather, her grandfather's brother, and her own uncle. Years later, when they checked her deoxyribonucleic acid, It showed patterns scientists swore couldn't be real. They thought the tests were messed up. Charity was her mama's daughter, niece, and cousin all at once. Her chromosomes told a story of inbreeding so thick it should have killed her. But Charity lived. Worse than that, she thrived inside that crazy family setup. She grew up believing the outside world was full of lesser folks, genetic mutts who ruined their blood by mixing with others. By 15, she was pregnant with her first kid. Daddy was her own father, who was also her uncle and her cousin. That kid, Thomas Whittaker, he grew up to be Sarah Mae's daddy, though calling him daddy don't mean much when you see how that family worked. The Whittakers had built their own little world, with its own rules, its own crazy logic, its own idea of normal. Kids grew up not knowing who was their mama, daddy, brother, or cousin, cause them lines had blurred clean away long before. Everybody was kin to everybody else in multiple ways. They talked in whispers about blood calling to blood, believing each new kid brought him closer to the perfect circle, a state of pure blood that'd give him powers regular folks couldn't even dream of. By the 1960s, when Sarah Mae came along, the family hadn't seen an outsider in over 100 years. They had their own talk, their own ways, and a terrible secret they guarded tighter than their own lives. That secret was about to be born into our world, and when it was, it smashed every idea about how bad human bodies could get twisted up. Sarah Mae Whitaker was 17 when she knew she was carrying something different than the other pregnancies she'd seen in her kin. By that age, she'd already had 2 babies, one at 14, one at 16. Both died hours after being born, their little bodies too messed up to live. The family called them deaths, offerings to the blood, sacrifices needed to reach that genetic perfection. But this pregnancy, it felt wrong. Sarah Mae felt the baby moving in ways that scared even her hardened kin. Instead of normal kicks, she felt pulses, like trapped lightning rolling in waves across her belly. By 7 months, her stomach was huge, her skin stretched thin like paper, showing dark veins wriggling underneath. The family was over the moon. The old folks whispered this was it, the payoff for their 100-year project. They'd made something beyond human, something that'd prove they were better than the rotten outside world. They got ready for the birth like it was the second coming, setting up weird rituals to welcome their genetic savior. But Sarah Mae, she was dying. The baby was eating her up from the inside. She lost 40 pounds even with that giant belly. Her hair fell out in chunks. Her teeth got loose and fell out. Creepiest of all, her eyes changed color, going from brown to a weird, pale yellow that seemed to glow in the dark. The family took these changes as holy signs, but doctors who later saw her records knew better. They were signs her body was being poisoned by that unnatural baby inside her. When Sarah Mae went into labor on October 13, 1971, she'd been out cold for 3 days. The family hauled her to the nearest hospital, a little country place 30 miles off. Only reason they went was because they wanted doctors to see the birth of their new kind of human being. They never dreamed it'd blow their secret wide open, or that the baby Sarah Mae had would end up a top-secret government project for the next 50 years. Dr. Margaret Powell had delivered over 3,000 babies in her 20 years at Mercy General Hospital. She'd seen every awful thing birth in could throw at you. But when the Whittakers carried Sarah Mae through them emergency room doors that October morning, Dr. Powell knew right then she was about to see something that'd follow her to her grave. The birth took 14 hours. Sarah Mae never woke up, her body shaken, with contractions so strong they broke 2 of her ribs. The doctors and nurses couldn't get a good read on the baby's heartbeat because the patterns were all wrong. Instead of a steady beat, the machines showed weird bursts of activity, more like brain waves than a heart. Nurse Patricia Williams, who helped deliver it, said later the sound coming from Sarah Mae's belly wasn't a normal heartbeat. It sounded like whispering. When the baby finally came out, that delivery room went dead silent. What Dr. Powell saw made a mockery of everything she knew about how humans are put together. The baby was alive, technically. It breathed. Its heart beat. Its eyes moved. But its shape? It was like a cruel joke on being human. Its head was huge, nearly double a normal newborn's, and so thin you could see the brain right through the skin. And that brain, nothing like in the books. Instead of normal folds, it looked like dozens of little separate organs pulsing on their own. The baby's arms and legs were stuck together all wrong. Arms came out of the chest at crazy angles, ending in hands with too many fingers twisted like spirals. Its legs were wrapped around each other like tree roots, and where its feet should have been, little faces, with eyes that moved and mouths opening and closing without a sound. Worst of all was the face, or faces, cause there were three of them, mashed together, sharing features, making one constant, silent scream. If you're still listening to this, you got more guts than most. Tell me, what would you have done if this was your blood? Because what came next pushed the limits of human kindness and doctors' rules in ways that still split experts down the middle. That baby was alive, but was it human? Did it deserve to live? Or was keeping it breathing just plain torture? Dr. Powell had 6 days to wrestle with questions that shook her beliefs about healing, right and wrong, and what life even is. That thing Sarah Mae birthed shouldn't have lived 5 minutes. Every doctor and rule said its problems were too bad to survive. But somehow, this twisted mess of human genes kept breathing, moving, existing in a way that made you wonder what alive really means. Dr. Powell decided to keep it going, not cause she thought it'd make it, but cause she had a horrible, scientific need to know just how far the human body could be pushed. For 6 days, the staff at Mercy General became unwilling witnesses to something that felt more like a ghost story than medicine. That baby never cried. It made sounds nurses called a cross between humming and static electricity. Its many eyes moved on their own, following different things in the room with a smarts that seemed impossible for such a messed up brain. Most unsettling of all, it seemed to know its family. When the Whittakers were around, it acted like it recognized them, maybe even felt love. The Whittakers never left that baby's side by its incubator. They talked to it in their strange talk, sang songs nobody understood, did rituals that spooked the hospital folks. They brought things from their mountain home, gnarled wood, rocks stacked in patterns, pictures of other family members showing worse and worse problems through the years. They called the baby the culmination and the perfect one, treating it with a respect that was almost sweet, but mostly just plain creepy. But the baby was dying, and its death wasn't like anything doctors had ever seen. Instead of organs just giving up slow, this baby seemed to be melting from the inside. Its see-through skin got dark patches where stuff inside was breaking down. But instead of looking pained, these changes seemed to calm the baby down. Them 3 faces, always screwed up in agony for 5 days, started to relax, looking almost peaceful. On the 6th day, when the morning shift came in to check, they found something that stuck with them forever. The baby was still breathing, but sometime in the night, it had twisted itself into a shape that shouldn't have been possible with its stuck-together limbs. It lay in that incubator in a perfect spiral, its bent body forming in a pattern like old, unknown symbols. And lying like that, with what looked like a little smile on each of its 3 faces, the baby finally died. Took the darkest secret of American family blood with it, leaving behind questions nobody's answered to this day. Hours after that baby died, Mercy General got swarmed by federal agents. They rolled up in unmarked cars, wearing suits that looked plumb silly out in the country, carrying briefcases and gear the hospital folks had never seen. They said they were from the Centers for Disease Control, check-in on a potential genetic hazard. But Dr. Powell knew right off they were something else. These agents took everything. The baby's body, every medical paper, the pictures the family brought, even them twisted pieces of wood. They talked to every single staff member who'd seen the case, making them sign papers swearing they'd never speak a word of it again. The official death certificate just said multiple congenital anomalies, a fancy doctor term that hid the real horror. Sarah Mae died 3 days later. Her body finally gave out from the poisoning that baby caused. The Whittaker family, crushed by losing what they thought was their big win, went back up into their mountain place and vanished. Lawmen who tried looking for him later said the buildings were empty, though folks nearby swore they could still hear singing in the woods sometimes at night. Them classified files, opened 50 years later, spilled the truth the government fought so hard to bury. That baby born to Sarah Mae Whitaker? It was something that shook the foundations of what we know about human blood and how we change over time. Its deoxyribonucleic acid had bits that looked artificial, like someone had been deliberately fiddling with that family's genes for generations. Worst of all, looking at the family's records showed their breeding wasn't random. It followed a plan, A genetic recipe meant to cook up exactly what Sarah Mae had. The last page of that secret report has one ice-cold sentence. The Whittaker case suggests the possibility of intentional genetic experimentation spanning multiple generations, conducted by unknown parties for unknown purposes. The family's isolation and systematic breeding program indicate a level of organization and long-term planning that exceeds what would be expected from isolated rural populations. Further investigation is recommended to determine if similar programs exist elsewhere in the United States. That investigation? It never happened, at least not out in the open. But somewhere out there, deep in the Appalachians, in places where strangers ain't welcome and questions get met with buckshot, there might be other families following other plans, working towards other culminations that we flat out ain't ready to understand. The story of Sarah Mae Whitaker and her impossible baby is done, but the questions it asks about the hidden, dark corners of American bloodlines and who might be pulling the strings, them questions hang as heavy and unanswered as the mist in the mountain valleys where secrets like this are born.